The world is in chaos, ravaged by war and violence. In the heat of battle, soldier Jake lost everything that mattered: his comrades, his family, and his sense of peace. But his story didn't end with the war. 5 years later, struggling to rebuild his life, Jake is thrown back into the nightmare of violence when his family is brutally murdered. Consumed by vengeance, Jake takes matters into his own hands, wiping out the killers and finding himself behind bars with nothing left to live for. Just when he thought it was all over, Jake is pulled into an underground organization, Section 8, a shadowy force that operates outside the law. Promised redemption and a new purpose, Jake joins this lethal unit only to uncover a terrifying truth. He's been betrayed, manipulated, and used as a pawn in a deadly game. Now, in a relentless battle for justice, Jake must take on the very people who lured him in. Will he reclaim control of his life, or will he lose himself to the darkness of the system that made him a weapon? Prepare for an explosive, adrenaline-pumping ride where survival isn't just a mission, it's personal. In Afghanistan, a drone flies over a small village, drawing the attention of the residents, who immediately prepare for an attack. Soon, a group of American soldiers arrives and discovers that the town is empty because everyone is hiding inside. The team keeps moving, and when they come across a suspicious man with a bomb, they immediately surround him, threatening to shoot him if he does not drop his weapon. At first, the man tries to ignore the threat, but when he realizes the soldiers mean it, he pulls out a gun, forcing the soldiers to kill him with a few shots. Jake then informs Colonel Mason about the dead man and the bomb, requesting permission to disarm it. Mason refuses, but Jake ignores him and works on it, eventually disarming it. At that point, a secret second bomb goes off, killing the majority of the soldiers. Soon, the men emerge from the buildings and surround the Americans, opening fire and sparking a vicious gunfight. American soldiers are falling everywhere, and only Jake and Mason are still alive. Jake runs to join his colonel and is nearly shot by the enemy, but Mason saves his life just before a helicopter arrives. 5 years later, Jake is adjusting to life as a civilian while taking medication to treat his PTSD. Earl owns an auto shop, so his new job requires him to work extra hard to deal with some entitled customers. After work, Jake returns home to spend time with his family. He always tries to keep a positive attitude for his son, but things get tense in private when his wife points out that they have a lot of unpaid bills. However, Jake promises to take care of it as he always does. When Jake puts his son to bed, he shows him a picture and tells him a story about his old squad, including the fact that Mason was in the hospital when the baby was born. Jake laments not having spoken with Mason in a while, and when the kid asks if he has ever killed anyone, Jake dodges the question. The next day, Jake arrives at work to find a group of gangsters claiming Earl owes them money. When Jake attempts to kick them out, the leader Fresh dispatches his men to beat him up, but Jake easily defeats them all with a wrench. Fresh stops him by showing him his gun, and he leaves with his gang, promising a second round in the future. Jake then confronts Earl, who admits that he was once a member of a gang, but was fortunate enough to escape and build something he could call home. Earl promises to always protect his block, so Jake won't have to worry about his family. Jake feels like he's still at war and calls his family to check on them, only to hear his wife tell him that he should have called the cops instead of getting involved. Later in the evening, Jake returns home and sees Fresh in his car, mentioning payback before driving off. Jake rushes inside the house, panicked, and is devastated to discover his family is dead. So he screams and cries and has a complete breakdown. The police arrive moments later and attempt to question Jake, but he snaps and flees in his truck. He drives through the city looking for Fresh's car, his mind replaying his fondest family memories. When Jake finds the car outside a naughty club, he rushes inside with a gun in hand and begins shooting every single gang member without hesitation. When he is about to kill Fresh, the man explains that he did not intend to kill Jake's family, but he had no choice. This does not change Jake's mind, and Fresh is also shot. 5 months later, Jake is serving time in prison for his crime, and his PTSD worsens as he spends the majority of his days picturing Fresh murdering his family. Jake is surprised to receive a visit from Mason, who offers to help reopen the case. Jake refuses because he believes he belongs there and repeats what he told the judge. He got his revenge and now has no remorse. He'd even do it again. Jake then tells Mason to never return and instructs the guard to take him back to his cell. That night, Jake recalls his days in the army and how Mason retired after saving his life. Sometime later, Jake is visited by a stranger named Ramsey, who claims to run a private task force. Jake, on the other hand, refuses to let him say anything else and again requests that the guard take him back. Later that evening, Jake is dreaming about his family when a group of masked men break into his cell, sedate him, and kidnap him. When Jake awakens, he finds himself free of prison and learns that his kidnapper is Ramsey, who admits that he has been watching Jake for a long time and is impressed by his record. Ramsey's organization, Section 8, does not play by the rules, and Ramsey believes they can restore Jake's purpose. As a final touch, Ramsey says Jake's son wants to see him as a hero, not a convict, so Jake agrees to join. Later in Washington, D.C., Ramsey introduces Jake to the rest of the team, including Elias, Ajax, Brunner, and Mueller. Then he gives him a tour of the Batcave, explaining that they have 8 operatives in Washington and another 8 around the world. Their orders come from the State Department and the National Security Agency, and they are always related to dealing with threats to national security. Because Jake is just getting started, Mueller will keep an eye on him and accompany him on all missions until he gains seniority. Jake will also receive a bank account, a city apartment, a vehicle, a backstory, and an alias because he is presumed dead by the rest of the world. Then Ramsey must leave, so it is up to the team to put Jake through the initiation procedure. Ajax begins to provoke him, pushing him around and throwing punches. Jake refuses to fight and tries to avoid them all, but Ajax becomes so aggressive that Jake snaps. He pushes Ajax to the floor and nearly stabs him in the eye with a pen, but then he remembers his family and calms down. Then Jake leaves, and a frustrated Ajax points out that Jake has shown fear, implying that he does not belong with them, but Mueller disagrees. Sorry for the small pause. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you have, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss out on any future updates. Now let's get back to it. Later, Jake and Mueller board a plane and discuss Jake's first mission. The target is a man named Castillo, a defense contractor who also sells weapons. He recently obtained some dangerous schematics that he intends to sell to the Russians, so Jake's mission is to retrieve the schematics while also killing Castillo and his men. Jake realizes they are essentially a group of assassins and is not looking forward to killing again. In the evening, the duo arrives in Mexico, where they find Castillo about to conduct the exchange with a Russian negotiator in a warehouse. While Castillo and the Russian argue, Jake sneaks around and kills a guard. The noise makes both gangs believe the other is setting them up, which turns them against each other, and their argument quickly escalates into a full gunfight. The gang members begin to die one by one, even causing a car to explode, bringing the fight to an end. Then Jake appears and kills every survivor before looking inside the car, where there are 2 terrified women. Jake ignores them and takes the schematics before departing. Later at the base, Ramsey chastises Jake for jeopardizing the mission's integrity by keeping those 2 women alive. Jake attempts to explain that they were victims and accuses Ramsey of disregarding human life. So Ramsey threatens to return him to prison if he does not comply. Then Jake is fired, and Mueller tells Ramsey that Jake did well, but Ramsey remains hesitant. So Ajax steps in and implies that Ramsey made a mistake. Ramsey calls someone named Locke after he is left alone. The following day in Nevada, mercenary Locke breaks into a hotel and murders a few employees before entering a room and scaring away the women before confronting his target. The man knows Ramsey sent Locke and attempts to bribe him with a large sum of money, but Locke kills him anyway. Locke then escapes through the hotel's casino, but the guards become suspicious and pursue him. Locke easily beats up every guard who approaches and starts running, breaking things along the way and knocking out the guards who follow. He eventually takes out his gun and fires a few bullets to cause panic in the gambling crowd. He also kills a guard before fleeing outside and stealing a car. Meanwhile, Jake moves into his new home and is surprised to find a frame containing a collection of photos from his time in Afghanistan. This reminds him of a conversation he had with Mason, in which Jake blamed himself for injuring him and Mason comforted him. Later, Jake is drinking at the pub when Mueller joins him, so Jake tries to get some information from her. Mueller knows nothing about Ramsey, but she reveals that she used to be in the army and punched a commander officer who reprimanded her. Later, Ramsey assigns them a new mission: retrieve dome digital information about a sensitive case and assassinate Senator Graham, who is a traitor to the country and has paid many people to remain free. Security will be strict, so Ramsey reminds everyone, particularly Jake, that they must fight back. A few hours later, the group arrives at Graham's event in California, disguised as landscapers. Mueller sneaks inside and kills all of the guards she can find, but security eventually learns of the situation and takes Graham away in a van. While Mueller hacks the senator's computer, Jake pursues Graham, shooting a few bullets but failing to hit him. The van is too fast for him, so Jake takes a shortcut by jumping over a hill and blocks the road. A guard tries to fight him, but Jake quickly kills him before approaching Graham, who begs for his life and claims to have a family. Jake is suddenly overwhelmed by memories and decides to let Graham live. However, the team arrives, and Ajax kills Graham before telling Jake not to hesitate. Jake later struggles with guilt at home, crying while looking at photos and drinking. When he notices masked men running outside his window, he hides before they enter his home. The men look for Jake in every room, but he escapes through the back door. The next day, Jake visits Mason and tells him the entire story. Mason mentions that the original Section 8 was dismantled in the 1990s, and the one that is still operational is a cesspool of disgraced agents from the Army, CIA, FBI, and other agencies. They even have important connections in Washington. So if Jake flees from Section 8, he is in grave danger. Mason has never heard of Ramsey and promises to make some calls. He also agrees to provide Jake with money and a gun. After that, Jake returns to his hometown and receives a call from Ramsey, who requests a meeting to discuss things, but Jake declines. Then Ramsey requests that Mueller contact Locke, who is currently hiding in Argentina, and assign him the mission of killing Jake. Jake later runs into his son's best friend, and as they discuss the tragedy, he discovers that prior to his family's murder, Fresh was seen with people dressed in black suits, similar to secret agents seen in comic books. Before he can gather any more information, Locke appears and opens fire, so Jake pushes the kid into a shop before fleeing. Locke kills a few civilians, causing panic in the area, and when the police arrive, Locke shoots them as well. This distraction allows Jake to flee, so Locke steals a police car and searches for him while calling Ramsey to inform him of what happened. In the evening, Jake hides at Earl's shop and recalls how Earl raised him after his parents died. The computer suddenly beeps to announce the team's arrival, so Jake and Earl grab some weapons to fight them. Jake was almost shot by Elias, but Earl quickly took him out. Next, Brunner jumps on Jake, and they fight on top of a car before Ajax shoots at them. Brunner turns around to yell at his carelessness, and Jake seizes the opportunity to stab him with a screwdriver. When Ajax opens fire again, Jake uses the body as a shield and retrieves his gun to begin shooting back, but he quickly runs out of ammunition. Ajax has a few left, but he wastes them on purpose because he wants to fight Jake hand-to-hand again to prove his superiority. The men begin exchanging blows all over the shop, and Ajax attempts to stab Jake, but is shot by Mueller. Jake then checks on Earl, who is fine, and gives Jake his car keys so he can flee because the cops are approaching. Later in the car, Mueller claims she saved Jake because she wants to leave Section 8. Jake doesn't trust her and demands to be taken to Ramsey's location. The next day, the two arrive in Montana and attempt to sneak through a forest to find Ramsey's cabin, but when Jake turns around, he is knocked out. After another dream about his family, Jake wakes up tied to a chair in a room with Ramsey and Mueller, who has been working for Ramsey to set up this trap for Jake. Ramsey announces that he has a surprise for Jake, who is surprised to see Mason enter the room and discover that he has also been working with Ramsey. The organization had been looking for an agent with Jake's skills, so Mason told them how to find him. This means they were the ones who paid Fresh to kill his family. Jake cannot believe Mason betrayed him, but Mason simply states that Jake was wasting his talent on cars and a child. Afterward, the group leaves Jake alone, and Mason pays Ramsey and Mueller the agreed-upon amount. Ramsey suggests they kill Jake because he is a liability, and Mason agrees, but he looks inside. While Mueller counts the money, Mason goes to see Jake and frees him before admitting the truth. He was hired to take down Section 8 from the inside, and now he wants Jake to help him finish the job. Then Mason intentionally sets off the alarm, and when two guards arrive to investigate, they are quickly killed. More men arrive, and the duo shoots them all as they try to find Ramsey. Another gunfight begins as bullets destroy their surroundings, and when Ramsey sees them, he hides with Mueller and offers Jake Mason's money. Jake refuses a shot, so Ramsey tries to persuade Jake that everything is Mason's fault, but Jake doesn't believe him. While they argue, Mueller sneaks around and tries to shoot Jake, but Mason tells him to move and takes the bullet himself, knocking Mueller down. Jake rushes to check on his friend, and Ramsey attempts to take the money, but Jake scares him away with a few shots. Then Mason asks Jake to finish the job before dying. Mueller intervenes and attempts to shoot Jake, but she is out of ammunition, so they begin fighting hand-to-hand instead. After exchanging blows, Mason stabs Jake in the shoulder, but he takes advantage of the opportunity to turn her own hand against her and kill her. Jake then goes outside and sees Ramsey flee in a car, so he steals a vehicle and pursues him. Both men open fire as they drive recklessly, and Ramsey becomes so distracted that he crashes. Jake approaches the wreck, and when Ramsey insults him for hesitating, Jake kills him. In the evening, the police bring Jake to meet General Savoy, Mason's boss. Savoy offers Jake a job and a clean slate if he agrees to join his team, but Jake declines, claiming that he has nothing to fight for. Just in case, Savoy gives him his card. Later, Jake returns home to find Locke waiting for him because he is still determined to complete his job as his reputation requires. Soon, a hand-to-hand fight breaks out, and both men demonstrate their incredible fighting abilities while also attacking with any object or furniture in the room. When the fight moves into the kitchen, both of them grab knives and continue to hit each other until Locke throws Jake to the floor. This allows Jake to retrieve his gun and eventually kill Locke. The next morning, Jake sends Earl a voice message thanking him for everything and announcing his departure. Meanwhile, Jake is on a bus and notices a mother having a tender moment with her son. Jake calls Savoy and accepts his offer, telling him he has something he wants to fight for. Savoy immediately welcomes him to Section 9. Alright, that's a wrap for today. If you enjoyed the video, hit like, it really helps the channel. Leave a comment with your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching and see you next time.